Hello everyone. This is a review of the Drop X-Mid 1P, designed by Dan Durston, a dual-door, dual-vestibule, trekking pole-supported single-person shelter that weighs 27.9 ounces. This is not a sponsored review. I bought this during a recent drop sale when I was having a crippling identity crisis about whether I was always going to take my hammock when solo hiking, and liked it enough to do a full review. It comes with 8 titanium shepherd hook stakes, which are nice and light, but which I augment with some sturdier stakes for out in the field. It has some handy setup instructions on the stuff sack to get you a nice good pitch, a nice touch. The tent comes in 2 pieces, the inner net tent and the outer fly. Both can be set up independently if you wish, and the outer fly can fit 2 people under it if you offset the poles a bit, although I haven't tested this out personally. For demonstration purposes, I have the 2 parts already attached to give a more realistic view of setup. One of my favorite things about this tent is that it only requires 4 stakes on each corner for a basic pitch, a rarity among tents of any type, but I usually use an extra stake on the door to make opening and closing it easier. The ease of setup came in particularly handy the first time I took this out in the dead of Minnesota's winter. I was so excited, I forgot that the ground is typically frozen in February, and spent about an hour trying to get 4 stakes in some very stubborn earth with just my bare hands. That is, however, not the most idiotic thing that I've done on adventures with this tent. More on that later. The tent is supported by 2 trekking poles, which can be inserted through the vents or the doors, which is a great feature that protects the inside from getting wet if you're setting up in the rain. Another great feature is that it doesn't fall down with only 1 trekking pole in place, so setting this up alone is quite easy. I will admit that although it's a very easy shelter to set up, getting a perfect pitch is still something that I'm working on. However, this doesn't affect the usability, and I don't think many people will have issues with this. Overall, I'm personally a big fan of how this tent looks. Its muted color and minimal design is so much more pleasing than some other more brash tents. Due to the nature of the adjustable trekking poles supporting it, you can stake this shelter low to the ground for more stormworthiness, or higher for better ventilation. I personally haven't fiddled with these different pitching options myself, but they are available. So, let's talk features. Each corner has line locks for easy tensioning, and the door features 2 more on each side. The door zipper is waterproof and wonderfully satisfying to use. Each peak has pre-attached guylines, although these are removable if you wish. Each peak also has an enormous kickstand style vent, which is easy to use and allows for the trekking pole to be inserted without opening the doors. The poles can be inserted tip up or tip down, although tip up will be more secure in high winds due to the grommets that hold the tips in place. The inner tent is attached to the fly with 2 adjustable buckles, so you can raise or lower the height of the inner net tent as desired. That inner tent is attached at each corner using a length of cord and some elastic. The doors feature a very clever but slightly fiddly toggle system that is superior to most other door systems out there, with the exception of perhaps some magnetic closures, but I haven't tested those firsthand, and they have their drawbacks as well. The inner doors also feature the same closure. Let's get a top-down view of this, shall we? From the top, it's very rectangular. In addition to the 4 corner line locks and the attached guylines, there are 4 attachment loops around the perimeter for even more staking options, if necessary. The interior layout of this tent is quite ingenious. The diagonal inner leaves 2 large vestibules on each side, and the offset poles create a long area of headroom instead of a peak, like some single pole shelters. Alright, enough of the outside, let's take a spin around the inside. Opening it up using that wonderfully satisfying zipper, we can see that Dan has added a bold but stylish racing stripe to the tent floor. Nice touch. Or rather, that's what I'm telling everyone. Remember how I said forgetting the ground freezes in winter wasn't the most idiotic thing I've done with this tent? Well, I'd say wearing sharp and rather aggressive microspikes when setting it up is. You can actually see the moment when I make a very poor decision. Ah, there it is.
Hey.
Fortunately, the 20D sill poly floor sewed back together quickly. My self-confidence did not. Anyway, the first thing you'll notice about the interior is that it's long and narrow, which means it's not exactly spacious, but also not cramped. It features a long gear loft pocket on top, which is nice to have and can certainly store a lot of small items, but I found it interferes with headroom if you have it packed full, which I frequently do. It makes me really appreciate the side pockets on the X-Mid 2P, and I'll probably be adding my own mesh pockets to the sides in due time. So actually being inside of the inner tent, there's enough space. However, it's not exactly what I would call a spacious shelter, at least on this inner part. And that's okay if that's your style. For me personally, it's something that I can live with, especially considering the other advantages that this tent design has. It's not going to be as spacious as some of the other single wall one-person shelters out on the market, but you know, you give and take with that. One of the things that you get is these huge, wonderful vestibules on either side, and I really, really like these. I can store a ton of gear on either side. I can put one type of gear over here and the other type over there, and I'm a person that I like to spread out with my gear, and despite the fact that this inner tent doesn't have the most floor space, I'm able to compensate with these huge vestibules. To give you an idea of how I fit into this, I'm about 6 foot even, so laying back and centering myself, I'm pretty good on this. I fit pretty well. I'd say this tent is probably good for people about 6'2" and under. Any more than that, you're really going to be pushing it. For me, at about 6 even, it's about perfect, and that's good. I don't really want to like carry a shelter larger than what I need, so for me, it strikes a really good sweet spot. And if you are a taller person and you don't mind having your head kind of up in the mesh like this, you're not going to have a problem because there's about 5 inches of good space in between this inner net tent and this outer, so you're not going to have an issue with hitting condensation.
The inner can fit wide pads, although the best thing I can show for context is a Nemo switchback, which is 20 inches. To show how I fit on the pad, I've stacked my switchback and the Neo Air X-Lite Women's, which should equal roughly 3.5 inches of height. I've used this setup winter backpacking with no issues. My head and feet were a comfortable distance away from the mesh, although as I mentioned before, I'm not sure how taller people would fare. On the topic of height, although I like the door and vent designs, the combination of their features means the entry is a bit low for my taste. I was glad to see this greatly improved in the X-Mid 2P, although it's certainly still usable here. I've unfortunately not had the chance to use this on regular backpacking adventures. I've only tested it in the winter and early spring. However, I can report that it performed admirably in all situations, and I think it would perform even better in more traditional environments. My usability complaints are as I previously mentioned. With a full gear loft and an inexperienced pitch, I was at the limit of my headroom, both inside and out the door, although that improved greatly with better pitching and more discretionary use of the gear loft. Its 43 inches of height sustained across the length of the tent means that it's quite comfortable when done properly. The narrow width of the inner meant I didn't store anything large inside the tent either. On the plus side, those vestibules really are luxurious and incredibly functional. Being able to split my gear to the left and right of me is a true organizational treat, and they're both large enough to fit a full 60-liter backpack, cook a meal, or make a cup of tea. Not that I condone stoves inside of vestibules, of course. The poles don't get in the way of movement, and throughout the nights I've found the interior space to be quite comfortable. There's enough room at the top and bottom to stash a few small items as well, which meant I had everything within easy reach.
I really like this tent. It's performed exactly as I've hoped it would and exceeded my expectations in many ways. I like that it packs down small. I like that it's made of sill poly so that way it doesn't absorb as much water and it doesn't sag. I also like the unique design. That offset diagonal on the inside is just great. Those 2 huge vestibules, for someone like me that likes to spread out gear, it's wonderful. It's not the lightest tent on the market, but with those extra ounces, you're getting a ton of functionality and comfort and overall usability that no other tent can really offer you at the same price and weight. And that's really the overall impression that I get with the X-Mid. It's not going to have the best specs in every department, but when you add everything up, it really cleans the field. People I wouldn't recommend this tent for are people over 6 feet, people who like a lot of interior space, and people that just don't want to deal with a trekking pole support shelter. But that's about it. If you're a backpacker that's looking for an all-around great one-person shelter, the X-Mid 1P should be darn near the top of your list. I'm just so glad summer's here.